Everybody, and welcome to another edition of Get in the Herd, the McShin Foundation's award-winning recovery podcast. We're in the studio today with co-founder and president John Shinholser. He's a special guest host with me. Of course, we got Justin on the producing side over here. But our special guest today is Delegate Sally Hudson, and she is in Virginia's 57th District down in Charlottesville. Or over in Charlottesville. And I believe you're running for your second term. Is that correct right now? Yeah, so excellent. Welcome to the show. Definitely have a lot of questions for you, especially concerning two of the bills that you put in last session. So we want to talk about HB 2303, which would reclassify simple possession for drugs and drug paraphernalia, and HJ 530, which is a study. So tell us, if you would, please, what that is and why you're doing that, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here today. And thank you also for everything that you have done to spearhead this work in Virginia. We are so fortunate to have partners like you in all of it. The bills that I put forth this session were all about trying to move us toward a more just and humane and scientifically sound approach to treating addiction and substance use. We know right now in Virginia, we're in the middle of this big transition around cannabis. But of course, there are many other substances out there in the world where our drug laws are outdated, if not downright draconian. And so we've got a lot of work to do on a lot of other fronts. And that's what this bill was about, beginning to take those steps. The first bill, which failed, was one that would have defelonized simple possession for all narcotics in Virginia. That means that we would end the felony penalty. The maximum penalty for substance possession would be a misdemeanor, which means nobody could spend more than a year in jail. And then I also put forward a study which would explore more broadly, how do we continue to reduce those penalties, maybe decriminalize some of these substances altogether, and really assess the adequacy of substance use and addiction services in Virginia, so that we can move off a model that is rooted in our jails and prisons and into something that is more embedded in our communities and where appropriate with our healthcare providers.
That sounds a lot like Portugal drug policies and the Portugal model. You must be familiar with that.
Yeah, we have partners overseas who have already moved in this direction, but we don't have to look that far for models of states that have already done this. Simple possession is already a misdemeanor in a lot of states, places like Oklahoma and Colorado and Connecticut, progressive bastions like Mississippi and South Carolina. So this is really a movement with bipartisan support. I think a lot of people know that the way that we deal with drugs in this country is behind the times, that we're not really serving anybody well. So it's excited to be working on something that really resonates with people of all stripes. This is not a blue team, red team thing. This is about, looking at people as people and trying to do right by them.
I wrote a op-ed one time in the paper, and I said, man, Virginia is poised to get it right. They have an opportunity to really be a national leader in drug policies and how we have flipped the criminalization of addiction and put it in the healthcare field and put it in the hands of people with lived experience. So I'm so glad to hear you speak this way. So glad to have you on the show with Nathan and be part of this. Nathan's over here beaming with thoughts. He's got that look, man.
Well, anytime I meet somebody who gets into this work, I have to wonder where that comes from. I don't know where your background is, but why do you do this, and why are you looking out for this community? And perhaps because I'm a person in recovery from a substance use disorder, I'm somewhat not suspicious of you personally. I'm just suspicious of people who are not necessarily in recovery trying to help the recovery community, because we know that the peer model is the best model. So what brings you to this work?
It's interesting. As you ask, it's something that I haven't thought about too much in some ways, because I feel like a lot of this work has been a part of my life because of my parents' work. For a long time, my father's a minister. My mother wore all the hats in the nonprofit world. She helped lead a halfway house for domestic violence victims and support refugee resettlement. And so I think that I was just raised to have an open door about just about everything, and to make room for everybody at the dinner table. And that I think that, so for that reason, maybe I just have a natural proclivity to working on issues with people who have been pushed out to the margins of our communities. And I think that's probably the honest truth.
Yeah. I see one of our founders and board members of the Global Recovery Movement, who's right north of you in Culpeper, Robert Legg. He's an incredible source of information, but he asked a question: what were the objections to the two bills, that you put forward?
I think that, like a lot of things, sometimes the objection is just too much too fast. That they were already making progress on cannabis, and that was really going to be the centerpiece of drug policy reform, and that we could come back at this work at a later date. I think it's hard to tell that to the many people who will be stamped with felony conviction in the coming year, when we had an opportunity to, I think, do what we know is right. But there was no objection to the study. I think everybody was on board with the idea that we should be digging into this more. I'm a statistician by trade. I teach stats at the University of Virginia. So I always appreciate people's inclination to acquire evidence. But at the same time, I think a lot of the pieces of what I was proposing this time around could have moved based on what we know from other places that have gone before us. I think in particular, part of the bill that was just straight silly that we couldn't move on this year was ending the penalty for residue crimes, for reclassifying residue as not possession, like we do in so many places, and indeed as we did in a lot of our national drug laws up until the war on drugs kicked off. And so,
I was reflecting back on one of Nathan's questions. I know one reason you're so passionate about this because you're a professor and you understand data and you understand statistics, you understand evidence base. So that's a special place to be, because most of these politicians are doing knee-jerk reactions, politically motivated, not based on the science. So you're able to shed light on the science. So that's a real value to have in the game. Another one of our supporters, Michael McDermott, who loves McShin Foundation, by the way, he asked that question: what is the status on HJ 530? Is that something you happen to know?
Yeah, so that bill will be moving to the Crime Commission for their formal process. It's sad that the Crime Commission is the one that's tasked with doing this work. I think we all know that this should be more in the hands of treatment providers, but that is where we send that work to, because currently so much about addiction lives in our criminal code. But that work will be ongoing in the coming year, and will hopefully turn around results for us before the next General Assembly session, so that we can act on their good guidance then.
Very good. Nathan, what are you thinking?
Well, so what the Crime Commission will be tasked with looking into that. Do you have parameters set for what they need to report back? Is there an open forum for the public to speak on what the public speaks and thinks about this?
So the charge, like what they're supposed to dig into, is all there in the bill. Outlines what they're supposed to study. The Crime Commission does meet, and there are some opportunities for public comment then. Truth be told, off the top, I don't know their upcoming meeting schedule, but I do know that you could Google it if you were online and find out those opportunities. But I think you're spot on that we need people who have lived through all of these hurdles to talk about what they need most, as opposed to just doing it from a distance.
Excellent. One of the objections to reclassifying or defelonizing, and let me put on the record, I definitely support defelonization. But one of the objections that I hear over and over again is what happens to individuals if they don't get arrested? How do they get into treatment? What do you say when you hear that? Because that's a comment that's going to come up if this bill comes up again. What do you say to that?
Well, I think we have this chicken or the egg problem from some people's perspective, that first we have to build up the perfect network of support services outside of our jails and prisons before we can begin to dial down what's currently happening in carceral facilities. And I think that that's problematic for two reasons. It assumes that what's happening behind bars is working. And then separately, just as a practical budget matter, a lot of the money that could be used to fund services outside of jails and prisons is currently being tied up inside of those facilities. And so it makes it very hard, I think, for government to expand funding for addiction and substance use, just because we're spending so much money locking people up. And so I think that we, like a lot of other states, should be able to look at what they've done, sort of take the step in the direction of trust, of putting fewer people behind bars, and in the process, we'll be able to move them toward other opportunities, in part because we'll be spending less money inside of our prisons and jails. But that is one of the questions that the study is designed to answer, to really assess the current landscape of those services in Virginia, so that we can target more funding where it's needed.
Let me paint a quick picture here. For the last, I'm going to say 50 years, our addiction epidemic has gotten worse. And now with fentanyl on the scene, it's like skyrocketing. But don't confuse fentanyl with the overall word addiction and substance use disorders. I'm talking alcoholism, prescription medication, although they're going down because of the crackdown on the pharma. But you still got, the other drugs out there. But the epidemic's gotten worse all these years. All these years, America and Virginia especially has plowed damn near 100% of the resources into the same old systems, whether it be the community service boards, the health system they have set up, the tax-funded health system, the criminal justice system, the industrial prison complex, the private jails. All these years, we've plowed all the money into what is 50% of the solution. Now, Dr. DuPont makes it very clear how valuable the recovering community is, the non-government organizations, the peer-facilitated groups like us, McShin, the sober home industry, all these other NGOs popping up. If we just put 20% of those dollars in the other 50% of the equation, which scientifically is proven to show greater than 50% of the results we're all getting. I mean, and I've been fighting this battle for 20 years. I don't know if you know much about my history. I sat on a joint Senate House subcommittee for 3 years back in 2009, 10, and 11. And we have cranked out so much evidence, so much data. And no matter what we do, they're not going to value us and fund us and let us show what we can do. So, and I see all this new money, SAMHSA just doubled the block grant funding, and it's all going to the same agencies as the epidemic gets worse. Somewhere in the mix, somebody down in General Assembly, we need more than just a handful of leaders and champions. I mean, have you given thought to that? And then Mike McDermott asked again, how can we move that ball forward? That's a critical, source of contention for us.
I really think that this is one of the biggest opportunities that we have for bipartisan compromise in Richmond. And I don't say that lightly. There are a lot of issues that do split straight down party lines that come across our plate. But I think this is one of them that genuinely brings a lot of people together, because they can hear and see exactly what you're saying. And so, I would just make sure that your delegate knows that this is a top priority for you, because I have been able to talk to colleagues of all stripes from every corner of the Commonwealth about this, and they understand that it's a challenge in their community, that it takes different faces and different trends in different places, but everybody has some flavor of it going on where they serve. And so I honestly think the kind of good old fashioned write your congressman, talk to your rep, is what's needed, because I think that we have a lot of potential to come together here.
Yeah, well, Delegate Hudson, I do recognize you as a champion, and I respect that and I value that. I've been going down to General Assembly for 20 years. I mean, the way it works down there, I don't know if you noticed or not, but they got all the different subcommittees. And on any given day, you're up against a subcommittee from a delegate from 200 miles away that could care less about you. So they're going to do their special interest driven babies, and they're going to ignore us. So a lot of this, it takes these delegates, you're correct, they got to pick up the phone and call these other delegates who sits on these committees and say, look, you got to move this ball forward, let more people take a look at it and quit killing these things in subcommittees. And
that's true, though. I will say one thing, which is that there are some things that changed overnight when Democrats took control in Richmond. I'm sure this is a nonpartisan project, but it is the case that criminal justice reform has changed dramatically with new leadership in Richmond. So
yes, it has. My hat's off to the Democrats too. I'll give you a lot of credit for that. You and the governor and the big blue wave, you have certainly delivered. But here we are. The funding is rolling, and they continue to ignore the valuable people in the community. And that's the part that really chaps my butt on a regular basis, frustrates the heck out of me. And I'm cleaning my language up because this is a live podcast. But I mean, I'm seeing more of the same. And the Democrats now you got a chance to really get it right. You're doing good. Please don't choke them, man. You got all that COVID money coming, and where's the portion for these sober living organizations and these percolating and emerging NGOs that are delivering the results in your own community? If you go to a CSB, you're going to get streeted. You're not going to get help that day. You come here to these NGOs, you get sober living that day. You get a detox that day. I mean, how hard is it to do the right thing?
No, I hear you. I guess what I'm saying is that that everything was stuck until that turnover in leadership happened. And now there is a long list of things to do on just about every front. And I'm not saying just justice reform. I'm saying housing and healthcare and education and transit. And part of the problem is we've got this part-time General Assembly that only meets for a couple months every year. And so it
seems like y'all meeting a lot here lately, over and over and over. They call you back into session.
Yeah, they do. Though the other piece about that is that we're not actually meeting every day.
Right.
That's happening, though we were stretched out for 4 months. We were only convening, especially the Senate, maybe once a week in there. Remember, delegates get paid $18,000 a year.
So I don't know how you do it. I really don't, man.
Yeah. So what it means is all of us have another job. So, I'm teaching full time.
Right.
When we get together, we're only meeting for a few hours at a time because we all got to hold down the other gig that we do. So as you're saying, it may feel like we're meeting all the time, but we're like, that just was the starting gun and the ending of the race. We weren't actually meeting 24/7 in that period.
Well, we're going to ask for $10 million from the COVID relief funds to go to sober living, to go to the Virginia Association for Recovery Residents, of which portions of that will go for the recovery program that the non-government organizations provide. So be on the lookout for that. We need you guys to rally, and we don't need to hear, okay, we're going to give you $250,000. No, we need $10 million, people don't realize it, but in the Richmond area alone, we have over 1,000 sober beds. We have 6 legitimate non-government recovery community centers. And that's one less jail we need in this area here. I mean, the money we saved since McShin started in 2004, we have saved the state taxpayers over $200 million just in diversion to the Department of Corrections. So you guys want to make a ton of money in the future? Put us in the game, man. Reimburse us. It's greater than the Trump stock market. I mean, this stuff is real, what we're doing down here. Nathan, you got thoughts, I'm sure.
No, I'm so glad you're able to join the show today, John and Sally. I'm going to call you Sally. You told me to call you Sally. I'm so glad you're here today. Michael McDermott says, speaking of budget, Northam administration just announced yesterday an 11+ billion financial windfall. Any thoughts on that? I'm not sure. I know Michael's more informed than I am.
I saw 500 million in the paper, but maybe it's 11 billion. Who knows, man?
Yeah, 11 billion. I'm not sure about that dollar figure. I'm not sure that rings right to my ears. But, I do think it's the case that there are a lot of priorities that are going underfunded right now. And I think it's our responsibility with both the federal stimulus money and with our state revenues to do good on a lot of things that have been put on the back burner for a long time. I think about the recovery community. I think about folks with developmental disabilities. The wait list for Medicaid waivers is a mile long. There's a whole lot of people who have been told for too long that there's not money in the state budget for them. And I think that, we have to do right by a lot of those people, and that we do have the funds to do it. And it's entirely a matter of willpower.
Patrick Jones, he asked a question, are there any impact on drug courts or those CCAP programs? Is that something you're following? I mean, I'm sure they're raising hell. They might lose customers if they recover. So,
yeah, so that was one of the features of this bill that we were trying to begin to tackle. And there's a lot to be done there to address drug court and also the first offender statute to get more serious about the fact that relapse is a part of recovery, and that we are pushing a lot of people out of those more flexible options by making the consequences of tripping up so intense. Because you've got people who, wind up with a more severe consequence than they started with, if they choose to take what is supposed to be a hand up. And so we've got a lot of work to do there, and I think that's part and parcel of what needs to come out of the other side of this study.
Let me reinforce something. Give you a couple talking points. Definitely defelonize drug use, simple possession. Definitely, you got to please get that done. And when the law and order guys complain about it as a cudgel to get folks, the help they need inside jails. Well, number one, not all jail programs are equal. There's really only a half a dozen decent ones, but you're still stuck with the felony. Number two, they are surrounded. Every addict I know that overdoses and they want to put them in jail, they're surrounded by little misdemeanor charges all around them. They constantly can get these kids locked up on misdemeanors and give them a jail program, give them good behavior, time off if they attend the program. There's so many ways to engage these people and incentivize them without felonizing them and ruining their life. So, the more this knowledge everybody has, the easier it is and the simpler it should be to sell the hardliners on this, to retool the whole system. So, like I say, misdemeanors. If you either go here to this recovery program or the treatment program, or you're going to go to jail and do your misdemeanor time. You're not going to be felonized. And while you're there, if you want to get half off of good behavior, you go to this great drug program we got in jail run by recovering people. That's another key. All these successful programs, most of them have peers involved, and the reentry needs to be there. You go door to door from the jail to a loving, embracing, compassionate, sober living situation run by people in recovery that continue to pass on the hope shot, the vision, and the pathway. So that's 50% reduction in recidivism, 50% reduction probably in foster care downstream somewhere, and tremendous increase in public safety. But God, I'm so glad to see the language and the discussions, but we got to get these hardliners across, the line here.
Mm-hmm.
Delegate, have you been watching what's been going on in Oregon, and have you any thoughts on that? They've just recently released the first wave of cannabis funding tax dollars to the organizations, the grantees. Any thoughts on that? Have you watched what's going on there?
I haven't seen the grant process, but I do know that, we're going to be watching Oregon closely every step of the way, because they are further down this road of decriminalization than we are. So there's an awful lot to be learned from them, and really from, at this point, states that are further down the road than we are all over the country.
Well, one thing in Oregon we picked up from me and Nathan the other day, we had some of the tip of the spear on the show who doing the recovery movement in Oregon, and they made it very clear. They said, John, number one, we got all these sober home operators ready to take these kids in, and we can't get reimbursement. So all the money's going to these agencies. They're not going to the people doing the boots on the ground. Get them off the street, out of the public safety theater of operation, get them into the recovering community. They're not being funded. They're holding it up. They're not funding the recovery programs run by the recovery people. They got the infrastructure, they got the ability to scale up to capacity, but the bureaucrats hijack the funding, delay the game. And in the meantime, the epidemic gets worse. And they had 450 tickets they wrote out since February 1st, $100 tickets. Here you got to pay the $100 fine or else. All 450 of them paid $100. Now, some people are going to look at that as that's not good. Wait a minute. If I had $100 and I was offered treatment or whatever, I'm going to spend my $100 on drugs. I will not go get help until I'm flat broke. And that's kind of how this works. So if you still got money to pay the $100 fine, you're probably not going to do anything but pay the fine. They're doing the engagement in the community. They're not doing it right. And the reason they're not doing it right because they're not funded. The reason they're not funded because special interests drive policies. And policies are driven by politicians who got to raise money, and then they got to support the special interest in funding them. But I know that's not your story. That's not your case. But it's a great big vicious cycle that goes over and over and over again. But Oregon is important. They got a ton of money to help people, and they're trying hard, and they think they're doing a good job, but they're choking. And I would hate to see Virginia choke. Virginia don't have to choke. Virginia can get this even better and righter than any other state out there. And it begins with, you got to look at the data. You're a data expert. The recovery results are off the scale fabulous, but we do need to be funded. We just cannot be, we can't go much further unfunded. So that's the solution. And that's what Dr. DuPont makes very clear. You know, the answers are with the people in recovery. That's your solution. Help those people. And I can back everything up after the show if you want me to send you some good stuff. So
I'm reading what Robert Legg says over here. He says, do you know what has been the impact on drug courts in the other states that have defelonized drug possession? That's an interesting question, actually. I
don't. I'm not sure what Robert's driving at on the impact on the drug courts. The defelonization is primarily about the punishment on the back end. Robert, are you asking about, do you see more people using the drug court? I'm not quite following.
Well, he's probably, I would imagine drug courts nationwide are squirming, okay? Because if a whole new system emerges, it's kind of like the first year with the Pony Express, you know, they did a great job building out, but then the telegraph came and then the trains came. And every time an industry emerges, an existing industry is going to get hurt. And that, I imagine drug courts, I don't know, I'm sure they got a great future, don't get me wrong, but we do got to get away from felonies, and we do got to provide services at the engagement level in the community, but we got to get the recovering people in these jails and prisons and driving those programs, because we set them up to succeed, not to fail. And I got live personal experience dealing with jails in Virginia, producing great data, great results, only to be sort of exited out of that space because of special interests, you know. So we got good problems to have that can definitely be solved, but we got to really start putting our money where the results are, and stop constantly funding an antiquated system of care as the epidemic goes up and gets worse. I mean, somewhere in there, you got to stop building battleships and build aircraft carriers. You know, somewhere in there, you got to get away from mail and letters and just use your email. You know, that just, you know, there's a lot of promise here, you know, and we're all passionate about it. And I know you are too. So a whole lot of people out there selling snake oil. You got to look out for that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Snake oil. I love it.
Stuff works in some cases.
Any thoughts on that, Sally?
No, I mean, I do think you're right that there will surely be an impact on our drug courts. If we do take this next step, and I think that we just have to keep moving in that direction. We're making progress.
Yeah, and I think whatever we do going forward, as we reclassify, as we defelonize, and let me tell you a little bit of my story. I was arrested on a possession charge in 2016, and my the 251, the first offender status, went out the window because I continued to use in pretrial. So I became a felon as a result of that. So I have a very personal interest in this, but also this is the same story a lot of us here have, or similar. And, I ended up getting sentenced to 2 years, suspended, but 2 years of prison time out of the possible 10, as you are aware, for that little tiny bit that I had on me. And then I get violated again in probation. And the reason that this is important to me, because it wasn't until I was introduced to recovery by other people in recovery. Now, for me, it was in the jail cell when I got arrested in probation. But at no point in pretrial was that ever offered to me or introduced to me. And in fact, I walked into this woman's pretrial office, and I was in Warrenton. It's not where I'm from, but that's where I was. And I would walk into this woman's office every couple of weeks, and I would look the part, play the part, speak the part, sound the part, and then I'd walk right out and I would do my drug of choice in the parking lot on the way home. Like, I was able to manipulate the system, and she had no idea, as I lost 45 pounds in front of this woman in 3 months. And and bless her heart, and I say that, but bless her heart, but it's like she had no idea what was going on. And if John had been sitting there, if Justin, our producer, had been sitting there, anybody who's listening that I can see name, if they had seen me, they would know exactly what was up with me. And so that's where we need that peer support right off the bat too. Like there, and we need it in the hospitals. We haven't talked about this much too, but there was a bill that went through last year, and then again this year. It's like a little bit, where we're trying to get better systems in place in the emergency departments to handle substance use related emergencies. And we can't even agree on having an naloxone given to individuals who come out, who overdose on opioid overdose. So we're really, really struggling here. And I'm glad that you're doing the work that you're doing, but we also want to make sure that we have the systems in place for where we are, right now. We have jail programs funded available, funding that non-governmental organizations like McShin, like True Recovery, like all the other organizations that are good, valuable systems, and not just throwing money. And I know CSBs are important, but not just throwing money at CSBs, which have bureaucracy layered by bureaucracy with individuals who have no lived experience and would rather spend $100,000 on a billboard than put beds where they need to. And this is something that we talked about at a meeting years ago. But so this is where we need to keep going. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing. We need more. We need more. We need you. And I realized I was looking at your committees here. You're on the finance committee. That's very important. And you're also on communications, technology, and innovation. We're looking for funding for our podcast. So here, but let me tell you where this goes. So we take this podcast right here, and it gets converted into all these other platforms right now. But we give this to what? PayTel?
PayTel. We give it to these companies
for free.
Yeah, that put tablets in jails and prisons all across America. And so if you're in jail or prison, you can be on your tablet. You can listen to, gang banging music or whatever. But the data shows the inmate that listens to educational stuff on their tablets, recovery stuff, faith-based stuff, they have a much lower recidivism rate. Our last quarter, we had over 200,000 inmates use our recovery content inside jails and prisons. And that's huge. And we got people here at McShin today that came from jails out of state because when they got out, they wanted to come to McShin. Nathan went to jail in Warrenton. That was a program we donated to the Warrenton jail. He met the peers there. We opened up a recovery center 1 block from the jail. So he went from jail to the recovery center. And then he was able to come down to Richmond to the sober living. And now he's one of our most valuable and trusted employees here. And this is how recovery works. It's not everybody's story, but our success rates are much greater than anything else out there I'm seeing. And that can be Virginia's story moving forward. And it needs to be Virginia's story. So we know how to not only plug holes, fill gaps, but we can navigate these challenges that are going to come with the new legislation coming. We just have to be at the table to educate people and help shape policies. We don't get any meaningful role in shaping policies. Yeah, we get to petition our government. We get to freedom of press, freedom of speech, but we got law and order people making all the decisions about recovery. And that's just not right. No wonder we can't get the play we need to get. That's ridiculous. It's like asking Al Qaeda to teach Hebrew. What do you think's going to happen? That was good.
That was good. That was really good. Patrick Jones up here. He says, my experience with the CSB, and this is okay. You're familiar with Step Virginia, right? And the same day access, right? They don't actually mean same day access. They mean same day assessment. And this proves it right here. My experience with CSB, my first appointment was available 70 days after my same day interview. 70 days later, I was not open to treatment anymore. He went out and did some more research. And I know Patrick, and I know he's doing great right now. In fact, I saw him a few hours ago. But that's the same story we hear over and over and over again. Going to the CSBs, getting same day access, except they're not getting the assessment. We get people here who call us at 7:00 at night. I get a phone call. Hey man, I'm ready to go. Let me, and we got them in a bed right away. So, I know I know that you've talked about CSBs in the past, and somewhere in one of the bills, I know there was some support for CSBs, and that's great, but making sure that we are going with the non-governmental organizations, these NGOs, like McShin and like other organizations that are doing this work, and making sure that we're supporting the authentic peer recovery community, the proven authentic peer recovery community.
Yeah. How important, Delegate Hudson, do you think it is for a doctor to be educated about addiction? Do you think that's an important piece of their medical training?
I mean, sure. I think that that's an important part of anybody's sort of awareness, but especially if you're going to be in a medical field. I'm probably not the best person to comment about what exactly should be required of medical training, but I would sure be open to the idea that that's something we need to do a better job of preparing people for.
Well, the answer is doctors, they get very little training on addiction and substance use disorders. Mm-hmm. I remember 20 years ago, we did a study, and your average doctor in America got a 2-hour training on alcoholism, and the class consisted of them going to an AA meeting. Mm-hmm. So politicians, people in the General Assembly, they should let McShin do like a 16-hour course. If you're going to go down there and make laws that affect addiction and recovery, you should attend a 16-hour, either online or in-person training on what addiction really is, what recovery really looks like, and all the different aspects. And I bet we get a higher level of quality laws. And they should probably do that for the education, for teachers and transportation and everything you guys vote on down there. But the way Virginia does it, they chop it up into committees. They put all the lawyers, in charge of all the jails and prisons and, drug laws, because they're the ones, that's the big special interest group, and so forth and so on. So you see the picture I'm painting here. I mean, but there again, you're our champion. I love you. You're great. Okay. Don't take none of this personally. We need more like you. Can I get an amen?
Amen. Amen. I noticed when, doing my little research, I noticed that you have for the first time, you have a Republican running in the 57th district in 16 years. Any thoughts on that? Any
Are you running scared, or you feel pretty comfortable with your district?
I think that he moved here maybe 4 months ago, so I'm not sure he feels comfortable with the district.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, no, truth be told, I think that the best way to campaign is to try to serve well. And so, I'm mostly focused on trying to do the job well and try to earn it back that way.
Man. Yeah.
Yep. Michael McDermott brings up another point. I've only been clean and sober over 38 years, Delegate Hudson, in case you didn't know that. Mike's got like 28 years clean, I believe. But ever since I got clean in 1982, we used to hold a lot of meetings in hospitals, So when the new people would come, back then they had treatment centers in all the hospitals. But wherever there's addiction, you want recovering people, whether it be hospital, jails, ambulances, in the community, in the courtroom, in the schools, PTAs, churches. You want people to be loud and proud about their ability to help people. Well, over the years, they just re-stigmatized it terribly, blocked us from everything. But, Mike keeps bringing up, there's your play right there. Now, do you have any forecast? You're hearing me and Nathan talk, you're reading some of our comments, you're hearing some things. Are we able to get some thinking patterns going in your brain? I know you got a brilliant, great mind there. I don't want you to get off the show the same person you come on the show. Are you feeling anything about our discussion?
Sure. Well, it's always great to talk with you, and I'm enjoying our time together for sure. We've got a long runway between now and when the General Assembly reconvenes again. So now is a great time to take stock of, what came out of the last session and what we can be doing in the months ahead.
Well, you're going to meet in August about the COVID money, how you're going to divvy that up and what the regulations are and the guidelines. And you're going to be allowed to carve out some money, send it over to the department, make it flow through to the Virginia Association of Recovery Residences, which is an agency run by recovering people. And then we decide how we're going to break it apart into the sober living, the recovery program. But all of that's going to be same day entrance into recovery house, same day seeing a doctor same day, getting in a recovery program. There's your differences, you know. So you will have an opportunity in August, and I hope you seize that opportunity.
Truth be told, I don't have a seat on the appropriations committee, which will mostly do all of that packaging. So I will be less involved in that than you might think.
But you can pick up the phone and call those people who do have a seat.
I understand, sir.
All right. I'm not called sir very often unless I'm getting a ticket or something. Sir, sign right here.
How often do you get tickets, John?
Not very often. I'm an old man driver.
I think the last ticket I got was around Charlottesville, so I drive a lot better now. Robert Legg asks again, yes. I wish you would take. This is actually really interesting. I know you're familiar with the Good Samaritan laws. I'm sure you are, that have passed in the last two sessions, in the last regular sessions. The Good Samaritan law still allows for prosecution of probation violations and still causes doubt, which results in delays in calling 911 or not calling at all, and should be treated like a heart attack. Do you have any knowledge on whether I'm probably asking this question, you probably don't know, but do you know anybody putting in the bill to update this, or do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a good question. You know, we've definitely made some changes to the Good Samaritan law in the last couple of years, and off the top, I can't quite catch what Robert was saying relative to the pieces that are already in motion. But I think the
probation violations. So individuals would not pick up necessarily a new charge, but they would, or they won't necessarily pick up a charge, but they can violate on probation.
Still a probation violation to be using the drugs and being in that situation. And what Robert doesn't know is Virginia has a pretty daggone Good Samaritan law. But Robert happens to know other states that have the best ones, and he'd like to see Virginia have the best Good Samaritan laws. And they do have broader, reaches with a whole lot less impact. And nobody's promoting or marketing the Good Samaritan law either. That's a great law. Every drug user in Virginia should know about that, But there again, no media play on that. I really haven't seen any newspaper or magazine print anything regularly. Look, if you overdose and call 911, you're good. You're not going to get locked up. It's one of, it's like some laws get passed, like COVID come along, right? Every single day, all day long, COVID, get your shots. They're free. Call up, Yeah, that's a bad illness. It's an epidemic, a pandemic. Well, so is addiction. Where's the correlation there in the two illnesses? Hello.
He's a tough act to follow for me.
I'm sorry for hijacking your show. You know what happens when you bring me on?
I bring you on because you bring the institutional knowledge. I know you've been going down for 20 years. If I sat here with Delegate Hudson, we'd be just having a chat more than anything. And so I appreciate you bringing the knowledge here. And I know, I listened to the testimony earlier today. I listened to the testimony of the HJ 530. And I listened to the facts that you brought out, and that encouraged me because I know I know that you do stats, but I also know that you know what you're talking about, and I really admire that. Half of all new admissions to prisons and jails have a substance use disorder. Is that what that is? I can't read my own notes.
Yeah. If you're thinking about the pipeline of people going into those carceral facilities, half of them are coming in because something drug related.
Yeah. 65 to 85% of individuals in prison or jail are with, have a substance use disorder. Increases risk of OD 100-fold for individuals coming out or incarcerated. And I saw that. I've heard, I know that those first 2 weeks of individuals coming out is some of the most dangerous time. And I'll refer back to my own personal story. I got out, I had just spent 50 days in a McShin program, and I was released. And, I made arrangements to meet with, the person who had called the cops in the first place. So I still wasn't thinking 100% on this. And, I got out of jail. I went across the street to the McShin building and talked to them. I made some arrangements, yada, yada, yada. I was mandated from Warrenton. I was mandated to Richmond to come to the McShin program, right? But I went to my probation officer and they said, well, you can't get down there for 30 days. We don't really like those guys. But I said, but I'm mandated. Well, you need to take 30, 45 days. We'll figure this out. I'm like, I'm going to get high.
You need to hang out with your old drug using buddies for 30 days.
And sure enough, I got in the car with the people picking me up and I had stuff offered to me in the parking lot. You know, I got out of the car. And the only reason I got out of the car, because I'm not from Warrenton. I'm 45 minutes from my mom, who didn't want to talk to me anyway. The only reason I got out of that car was because that office was open. That door was unlocked, and I could walk right in there and say, I don't know what I'm doing, and I need help. And they knew how to help me. There was no judgment. There was no, like, what's your insurance provider? There wasn't, okay, we'll come back in 70 days. There was, we're going to help you. We're going to do it now. And the guy looked at me. It was April of 2018. The guy looked at me. He says, how are you with digging holes? And I'm like, I can dig a hole. You know, my whole life I'm digging holes. And he just took me over to his house. And you know what I did? I put a rose bush in his yard. He just had, I dug the heck out of that hole, you know, but they helped me for a week before I could get myself down here organized to Richmond. And I came down here for what I thought was a 28-day program. And that was a little over 3 years ago. So you see how that works. But we need more of that. We need more of that support. And we need to make sure that in any way that we're defelonizing and we're reclassifying, that we tie that with the authentic peer recovery community as well, so that we have actual access. We have accessible care right away. You know, so we're not just killing people, really. You know, we're giving people an alternative there. So what else is who
are the other delegates in the House that are friendly toward, you know, what we're talking about, or senators and delegates? Do we got a lot?
You know, I think that the folks who are most friendly to all of this, probably, you know, your usual suspects. I would think Delegate Rasul, Delegate Carter, Delegate Scott, Delegate Price. I mean, I think just a lot of folks who are generally on the side of taking a fresh look at things. But, you know, on the Republican side, I think I do see some good folks as well. I think, goodness gracious.
Look at that. You can't think of one.
her name is just escaping me and I don't want to missay it. Her first name is Carrie and I can't, I was calling
Coiner.
Thank you. Coiner. Yeah. No, I
wanted
to call her Delegate. And then I was like, oh goodness, what is Carrie's last name? Yeah. So hopefully that's a good sign that I just think
she did the Recovery High School 2 sessions ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then Senator Vogel, who put in the Good Samaritan law 2 sessions ago, and then it was I forget who it was.
That was a watered down bill, though.
Well, it eventually got watered down, but her initial bill was actually helpful. Yeah.
Well, I know Senator Bell, Senator Boysko, Senator Morrissey. They're all just wonderful champions of these issues for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some Republicans will be drawn over, but that Sheriff's Association, they're pretty strong, man. They lean on those Republicans pretty hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So moving forward, you know, you got time off to go do your day job, right? Go, you know, make some real money, I'm assuming, you know. The folks like us, anything we can do to help you, you know, either with, you know, getting some good bills passed or need any help in the district, you know, how can we help you?
Well, you know, I think you're doing it right now. You're making your voice heard. So it's very clear that, you know, you need to be the priority that you deserve to be. You know, I really do believe that most of what changes, you know, issues in Richmond is not data. It is real relationships with a representative who takes an interest in your case. And so I think especially going into this next year, you know, we're about to redraw all these maps for district lines in Virginia, which means a lot of districts are going to change. A lot of people will be representing communities that maybe they didn't before. And that'll be a great new time, I think, for a lot of representatives to go meet new constituents and start those relationships fresh. And so all that's just to say, I really do think that I think it's real relationships with real people that brought me into this work, and probably the same for a lot of other folks. And so to the extent that you can take some time with your delegate in this off season, when we do have more time to just, sit down, grab a cup of coffee, have a real conversation, I think it makes all the difference in the world.
Let me ask you a serious but fun question. Okay. I'm going to ask 3 predictions. Okay. Who do you predict will be the next governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general? Just a prediction.
Yeah, I'm not a betting woman, and I don't take bets on things that
I
matter.
didn't offer a bet. I didn't say you want to make a bet. I'm just saying, like Gene Dixon predictions,
Yeah. I don't think that's my game, but I'm looking forward to whoever finds themselves in those seats, making sure we keep working on this, because it's got to happen.
Wow, man. Okay, let's say we were past the primary. Who would you predict? Democrat?
We got to see the candidate. I know that I'm going to work my tail off to make sure that happens, because I think a lot of this work stops cold in its tracks without it. I mean, you said you've been going down to the General Assembly for 20 years. I do know we would not be legalizing cannabis right now, and getting rid of the penalty for simple possession for cannabis, if we didn't have a Democratic trifecta.
The way the cannabis laws were rolling out, I'm thinking they're going to drag this thing on for years. But then when Northam, he stepped up. He got some good stuff done July 1st. I was pleasantly surprised on that one. And next January, a lot of stuff can get done too. Yep. But I do predict Democrat governor, Democrat lieutenant governor, and Democrat AG. I think that's a safe prediction. No, Virginia's pretty blue, isn't it? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, we've been elected Democrats now for a good long while. I do know that there is a tendency sometimes for things to swing back and forth. If you got a Democrat in the White House, it can be harder to elect one here at home. So that's why I think, you always run like you're 10 points behind. And we need to make sure that we don't rest on our laurels, because there are, I think especially this year, because it has been such a hard year for everybody, there are folks who are tired and kind of ready to unplug from politics, and I don't blame them. But I think that's all the reason why we can't get caught sleeping. So a lot of us are working real hard between now and November.
You think we're going to be like mask free, COVID free, back to normal over the summer? Not COVID free, but mask free, get back to some kind of normalcy?
Well, I mean, I do think that, the governor has moved up the timeline for lifting COVID restrictions now to the last week of May, which is good. I do think it's going to take us a while to get all the children vaccinated, which is a big part of how things keep spreading. And I think the other piece is, friends abroad still have real COVID crisis brewing. And in a pandemic, as long as it's still spinning somewhere, it can, break out all over the world again. And so
I always heard it was a 3-year cycle, so we're like 2 years into it. We still got another year left, be my prediction.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, it's the most important thing that all of us can do is go out and make sure that we get our shots. We're doing real well here in Albemarle County. We have the highest vaccination rate in the state. We've got almost 50% of our residents fully vaccinated.
Well, that's pretty good. I'm going to spend time in Charlottesville, man.
Yeah, very excited about that. So, most places these days, whether they're the state-run clinics through the health districts or, your local pharmacy, these days, somewhere near you is probably a place where you can go get your shot on a walk-in basis. So, no more excuses about not being able to find an appointment. Somewhere there's a place you can roll in and get
all our staff got vaccinated.
All who wanted it, yeah.
And all our participants, the health department has done a good job making sure we get vaccinated. So my hat's off in that little area.
We actually have them coming here. They're coming here, I think, on Wednesday next week.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Just for the record, McShin was open every single day during this pandemic. We took new people in every single day. We were taking people to jail wouldn't take every single day. Our CSBs were shut down. They wouldn't let people in the building, but we were taking them in. Churches kicked out their AA meetings and they all come over here. So somehow we managed to navigate and mitigate pretty good.
We're resilient folks.
They were using drugs every day, so we wanted to provide them recovery every day.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Well, we are coming up to the hour here. I do want to give opportunities for you to finish, to give final thoughts here, but I do want to I want to add one word of caution that came up to me after the cannabis legalization happened. 25%, and something to watch for going forward because it hasn't happened yet, but 25% of the tax revenue is slated to go to DBHCS to fund prevention and treatment through the CSBs. That's fantastic. My word of caution is this. If that money goes to CSBs in that time period, we don't want to see that money get cut from somewhere else in the budget. So what I mean is that, just because they end up getting money from that tax revenue doesn't mean they should lose money somewhere else. And so I have that in mind, going forward, that we need to make sure that they don't lose, there's no penalty there. We want to make sure they're getting extra funding, which will eventually, of course, come to NGOs as well. I mean, we're going to fight for our funding as well, but we need to make sure that they don't lose funding in the process. So with that, any final thoughts from you that you want to add to this?
Just to say thank you for everything that you are doing, to make sure that you're talking with as many legislators as possible. I think people like you are perfect for being the tip of the spear, to make sure that legislators understand why it's so important that we push all of this forward. It's overdue, but we're going to keep at it.
Awesome.
Well, I do want to add congratulations on, sometimes I get passionate, you know what I mean? I go off on a rant, but you did wonderful being on the receiving end. I thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Your stock goes up in my book. So if I was in your district, I'd definitely vote for you.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. And thank you again for everything you're doing.
I would vote for you too. I've got my voting rights back. And thank you again. Your parents sound wonderful, by the way, and I hope that you're doing them proud. Thank you for everything and for being here, and I hope that we continue talking, throughout the rest of the session, the summer.
Yeah, likewise. Enjoyed. I don't know where you are. I can't see your windows, but it's gorgeous and sunny here. So
it's golfing weather, not podcast weather.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Bye.
Bye now. Thank you.
Here at McShin, we believe in the McShin way, which is authentic recovery support service providers, people with lived experience, bringing that experience to those who need that lived experience in recovery.
Here at McShin, we believe in many things to support our mission. We believe in women empowerment.
What I love most about what we believe here at McShin is we believe in the authenticity of the peer-to-peer approach.
Here at the McShin Foundation, we believe in giving people opportunity.
Here at McShin, we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
At the McShin Foundation, we believe in helping people reach their full potential.
Here at the McShin Foundation, we believe in multiple pathways to recovery.
Here at McShin, we believe in placing principles before personalities to help spread hope.
Here at McShin, we believe that recovery is possible and that any person seeking recovery can become a more acceptable, responsible, and productive member of society.
Here at the McShin Foundation, we believe in self-discovery.
Here at McShin, we believe in saving lives and offering second chances.
Here at McShin, we believe you can do this.
Here at McShin Foundation, we believe that we can only keep what we have by giving away, which is why we continue to help others like us seek and find recovery.
We'll get there soon. We could be any place.